This is Nick Kristoff with the Kristoff team, and going to talk with you today about this is my final video in the series about the loan process, kind of looking at it from start to finish, from pre-qualification through the official application, collecting documents, to what do processors and underwriters, what are they doing and what happens in those phases. And now we're at the point where you've got a final approval, you're clear to close, all of that exciting stuff is happening, and we're looking at, okay, what happens kind of in these final stages as we get ready to actually close that loan. So one of the things that I talked about in the earlier video, when you get initial disclosures, you're going to have a document called a loan estimate. Well, in the final stage, you're going to get a document called a closing disclosure. It's going to come at least 3 days prior to closing, usually delivered via email or sometimes via the mail. And it's required to be delivered at least 3 days prior to closing so that that person can review it and confirm that all the numbers are what they expect to be before the closing. So it's a great idea to compare that with your original loan estimate that you had. Obviously, if there's any changes that you've intended to make, that's fine. But if there's something that's there that shouldn't be or that you didn't expect to be there, it's a great time to ask. And so you can have ask questions of sometimes the closing department for that lender, or always go right back to your loan officer. They're the one that's probably going to know the most about those details. So you get your closing disclosure. You're in the home stretch for closing. What's happening here? This is where there's a lot of activity between the actual closing department at your lender and the settlement agent. Could be an attorney, some states it's a title company, but it's that final engagement to confirm all the numbers, to make sure that that closing disclosure is an accurate representation of that transaction. If it's a purchase, to make sure that all the information from the seller side is there, that everything is ready to happen so that you can actually take ownership of the property and that the loan can actually provide the funds to pay the seller so that you can take ownership of that property. And so they're going to coordinate that piece. So there's a lot of interaction happening there. Also, kind of as you get into that home stretch, a lot of times I'm working with folks, and that's when life gets the craziest. So particularly if you're moving, you've got a lot of moving pieces there. So it's important to reach out to that loan officer, and a good loan officer will also reach out to the client just to say, hey, here's what to expect in the final stages. Here's when you're going to get that closing disclosure. Here's where you should be looking to either send money to the closing attorney or that settlement agent that's going to handle the transaction. Here's who you've been maybe talking with, and you should be your main point of contact going forward. But kind of clearing all of those kind of final details in place, because at this point your loan's approved. You've got that final clear to close. It's just a matter of, okay, what are the actual steps to take place that are going to get us to that closing table? What needs to happen? So a lot of times they can vary a little bit by the individual process, whether or not you're going to be closing in person, sitting with that attorney when you're doing it, whether you're closing via power of attorney, maybe away or remotely. So all those details can be figured out, but your loan officer is who you should be talking with, and they also may involve someone from that title company or attorney's office. A lot of times a paralegal is a great point of contact to kind of confirm those final details as well. So that's what's happening at the closing. Particularly if you're there and you're sitting there and it's a purchase, you're not there usually with the seller, but you're sitting there, you're signing all the documents with that settlement agent, closing attorney, and that officially is when you take ownership of the property and when all the money changes hands. And so you've got keys, they've got funds, and the transaction becomes finalized. So at this point going forward, your new loan is in place. If it's a purchase, you've got the keys to your new home. And so at this point going forward, you're good. You've got your loan, you're ready to go, and that completes the overall process basically of getting from pre-qualification through the closing. So check out all the other videos if you haven't. It's going to walk you step by step through the process. If you have questions about what would that process look like specifically for me, or is it different for this type of transaction or this kind of loan, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to answer questions, to talk you through that process and let you know how that might work for you.